G'day everyone, welcome to Get Lost with the Travel Guide with your host Ben. Today we've got Mr. Mark Fay up in Darwin. Mark has been a long-term traveller for years. He's been to 100 or 150 different countries, been to all the continents, spent many years as European tour leader, but most importantly, we're going to talk about Darwin. All the way up in the northern parts of Australia, Mark has been relocated up there and he's been running tours around there. So he's going to tell you as much or tips, tricks and hacks if you're going to go to the top end of Australia. G'day, Mr. Mark Fay. How you doing, buddy?
Benny, I am pumped to be here. But sorry, can I just get one thing out of the way very quickly?
Please clarify my introduction if I haven't said anything correctly.
I'm just a little bit angry, not at that, just something you mentioned earlier about somebody very close to me. So I'm just going to say this once and keep my wife's name out of your fucking mouth.
Very close to you.
It's relevant. It's funny still. Anyway, yes, you are.
This is why we do virtual, so you can't slap me.
Yes, Ben. You didn't introduce there at all how good of friends we are. What are you trying to distance yourself from me in case this goes poorly?
Well, I was trying to stick to the point about Darwin, and I knew if I gave you a bit of ammo, we'd just go on a tangent. So I was trying to keep you on the straight. That's because I do know you quite well.
No, spot on. I am currently living here in Darwin. I've been here for just over a year now, and I've spent most of my life traveling around the world. And do you know what I'll say, Ben? This is my most favorite place I've ever lived. Ever.
Now, and that's a bold statement. Now, clarify how many countries you've been to say that it's the best place.
I would have been between anywhere from 120 to 150 countries. I lived in Spain, Portugal, England. I've lived in different places across Australia. I've lived in Ireland. I was born in Ireland.
You lived in Melbourne. I know you're from Perth.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
All right. So why you've been all these places? Now, that's a bold statement. Now, typically Aussies will always say their hometown or anything's a favorite place in the world because we're just born and raised that way. But why is Darwin the place to be?
You know, a bold statement for a bold man. Why is it the best? I'll tell you why. One, Ben, do you know what the NT actually stands for?
That's an obviously, people would say it's Northern Territory.
You'd think so. It actually stands for no traffic. It also stands for not today, not tomorrow, not Tuesday, not Thursday. Mate, it is one of the chilled places you'll ever live in your whole life. Literally, there's no traffic. Nobody's in a rush. There's waterfalls. There's crocodiles. There's places you can swim everywhere.
There's waterfalls in the city? I thought, or is it outside?
The waterfalls are out of Darwin, but you got to remember, Ben, anywhere you want to go from Darwin outwards literally takes less than 3 hours. And I'm talking you go to some amazing national parks. So like Litchfield, which is one of the big highlights, that's an hour and 20 minutes out of town. You know what I mean? And when you go to Litchfield, there's literally about 7 waterfalls you can go swimming at. There's ones you can't go swimming at as well, and that are good for photos. It's it's a beauty.
So these places, when you go swimming, I've heard there's a bunch of crocodiles, so you got to watch out for that. I'm guessing, I would hope so. Are you swimming with crocodiles?
You are, but Ben, the key thing to remember is they're very friendly and they like to play games. Their favorite game is Snap. So just be social with them and they'll
So how are you avoiding them? Like obviously you're going to places where there's no crocodiles. But how like I understand it, but can you explain, you know, if you've just arrived in Australia, hopefully when there's tourists arriving again from internationally, they got no idea about Australia. How can they tell the difference between a safe and a non-safe waterhole to swim or waterfall?
No, good call. Basically, in the territory, you don't swim anywhere that says, unless it actually says it is safe, open for swimming.
Like a sign?
Swimming there. The only places you should ever go swimming in the Northern Territory is when you see a sign that says open for swimming. If you don't see that sign, you do not go swimming.
What if there's no sign?
If there's no sign, you just do not go swimming, my man.
How did those people figure out how to put the signs there to begin with?
Well, there's signs everywhere because it's the Northern Territory. I'm literally a 5-minute walk to the beach here. You don't swim at the beach here. You don't swim at any of the waterholes. But you might wonder why and how can you go swimming? You're saying, oh, there's waterfalls to go swimming, awesome places to go.
I thought it's to do with the water. Like there's saltwater crocodiles and there's freshwater crocodiles. And there's ones that live in brackish water, which is a mixture of saltwater and freshwater.
Yep.
Is it all related to that?
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. Which is the more dangerous of the two, the saltwater or the freshwater?
I believe the salty.
Yep. Saltwater is the most dangerous crocodile in the world. The second most dangerous is the Nile crocodile. So the thing with the salt crocodile is it lives not only in saltwater, it also lives in freshwater. The freshwater crocodile we have here, that you could go swimming with it. You could be patting it. It's probably not even going to touch you. There's actually never been a recorded case of anybody dying up in the territory from a freshwater. It's the saltwater ones. So how do you know if there's salt waters in the water? It's really the only time of the year that you know you can 100% go swimming in those areas that are open and cleared by the rangers is the areas which are during the dry season. So they generally, what they do is they close off the area once they've relocated all the crocodiles. That's when the water levels decrease and drop, and then you can go swimming in those areas. So it is still a swim at your own risk technically, but the thing with me is, Ben, no crocodiles mess with me, okay? They come near me, there's a big, big problem.
Well, you're not German. They seem to love Germans historically.
Is that right?
Maybe, yeah. Well, like I know in northern parts of Queensland, because there's crocodiles like around the top end, around the tropical parts of Australia, the signs will be in English like crocodiles don't swim. And it'll be like, Achtung, I think it's danger in German. It'll be in Chinese as well. Is that the case as well? Like, because Darwin is a very transient population, but I know has a very high tourism, people arriving in and out. Is that right? Like are the signs in different... Yeah. So that means...
It's funny you...
Yep. Go.
No, it's funny you say that. Now that I'm thinking about it, no, most of the signs are just English and written usually in Mandarin. So
not German.
The big clientele, no, not German. No, like the big clientele we have here is Asian clientele because we're so geographically close to Asia. It's, we have the odd Egyptian, an Egyptian crocodile that comes here. And do you know why they don't admit when they're in the wrong though, if they swim in the wrong places?
I don't know, Mark. Why?
It's because they're in denial.
Hey, yeah, I warned you about those dad jokes and you had to slot it in there. But you're making learning fun, which is what I love. So imagine, the fun fact is just before COVID, the biggest tourist arrival in Australia was from China, second German, and then like Americans, Europeans, and so on. Nowadays, who really knows, but I would say nowadays it's bloody Aussies. So not all Australians turn up on a tour group. Many Australians turn up. We're a very independent type culture. So if we were to fly up ourselves and hire a 4-wheel drive or a car, is that easy to do? Or I've heard there's a thing called a Darwin tax because it's one of the most small, isolated places on the planet. So to get something simple like hiring a car, I've heard can be quite expensive. Is that right?
Spot on. You will get, if you want to hire a car here, you're looking at around about $200 plus a day.
Well, I feel like a little Toyota Yaris. You're talking like a big beast of the vehicle.
You'll get a Yaris if you like. Getting a 4-wheel drive here is challenging, and there's a lot of legal logistics that go with it because there is a lot of off-road driving here, but a lot of car insurance companies won't cover you. So as Darwin and the territory is renowned for is, of course, the fishing trips, the hiking, of course, going out to, beautiful.
Is it? I don't know. Tell me, mate, I've been there and I don't remember it. It's been many years. Sell me Darwin. Why should I go? Why is it the best place in the world?
You are the most handsome man I've ever met, and I'm going to sell you the most handsome, most beautiful place in Australia. Would you like that? Is that what you're after?
Challenge accepted, mate. Let's go. Let's do this.
Okay, first of all, Darwin, the Northern Territory, but let's speak specifically more about Darwin. It has probably Australia, maybe one of the world's most famous national parks. And that's, of course,
Kakadu.
Kakadu. So
Is
Ben,
that
quick
home
question for
of
you.
Crocodile Dundee type movies? Is that the type of scenery?
It is. Actually, many scenes from Crocodile Dundee were filmed there. When I'm taking my passengers to what's called Nurlangi, which is where there's awesome Indigenous rock art and a really cool lookout area. We actually drive past, the scene in Crocodile Dundee where the buffalo gets put to sleep.
Oh, yep, the old Ridgy Didge bra. Gotcha. Yep.
So Kakadu is the big one, mate. To be honest, like most people that come to Darwin won't leave without visiting Kakadu. And look, you're probably wondering, why do they want to go to Kakadu? What's so famous about Kakadu? What's the appeal?
Give us 3 fun facts about Kakadu.
Yep. It has the largest concentration of Indigenous rock art in, well, technically the world. And you've got to remember, Ben, the Indigenous culture is the longest continuous culture still surviving today, over 65,000 years.
That's correct.
So that's one thing. The other reason you'd go to Kakadu is you'd go for the waterfalls. They have Jim Jim Falls, Twin Falls, and you can go swimming at those. It's a little bit of a hike to get to.
Crocodile free.
They are during the dry season. Again, you've got to be careful the time of the year you go. So
gotcha.
The dry season is beginning around now. So we're in April, and the dry season finishes kind of towards pushing on Christmas, a little bit before Christmas. But generally,
for those, let's just sort of unpack that right now. I'm familiar with it, you're familiar with it, but other people don't know the difference. Because if you're living in Melbourne or from Europe, you're like, wet season, what? So it's the tropics, right? So situated geographically where Darwin is not that far from the equator. So there is no such thing as winter or autumn, either fall or spring. You've just got wet season, dry season. And I've also heard there's the most amount of recorded lightning strikes in Darwin on the planet. So is that in the wet season? So it just must be, how often does a lightning strike happen near your house?
That's in the wet season. Lightning strikes, look, that fact, if it is true, and I'm sure it is, during the wet season, you'd get 3 or 4 days a week during the wet season. And like you said, the way Darwin is divided is basically half the year is dry, half the year is wet. Simple as that. Is it wet, raining the entire time? No, but there is the buildup, which is where kind of, it starts to get that real thick moisture and gets quite humid. Then it comes to the real pouring, wet, rainy season. And then when that's coming to an end, which is what we're in right now, it's now starting to heat up and become, 32 degrees every single day. So to answer your question, is there lightning strikes? Mate, people have lightning.
How often does a storm break through? Yeah. Is it like once a week, once a month on average? What do you think?
During the dry season, never. During the wet season, depending on the wet season, but you'd be probably like this wet season, we would have probably twice a week, and then and generally rain most days.
Good times. Sorry, I did cut you off about Kakadu, about the fun facts. So it was Indigenous, Jim Jim Falls, waterfalls.
And probably the other thing, which I don't particularly love because it's not my scene, but is fishing. Ben, what is the number one fish people come to fish for in Darwin?
Barramundi.
It begins with B. That's it. Barramundi.
Beautiful tasting fish. You can get it all around Australia. It's delish.
Mate, the best barramundi, and it's cooked 300 different ways here in Darwin. The best barramundi you'll get in the world is located here in Darwin. And you know what? Something which may surprise you as well, speaking of food, is Asian food. Again, back to our geographical location. Probably the best Asian I've had in Australia is located in Darwin. And it's something you probably don't think of, food in Darwin. Mate, if the food in Darwin doesn't take your fancy, come to my house. I'll make you a mean toasted cheese ham sandwich. Mate, it'll blow your mind. You will have the best meal here regardless. Speaking
of that Asian connection, I've heard one of the benefits of living in Darwin is if you look at the cheap airlines, I think Bonds is a new one, but the obvious ones like Jetstar, Qantas, Virgin. I think it's just you can zip over a little bit of a pond and you're in Bali, or you could get to Vietnam quite easily. Have you been checking that out?
Yep.
The international airport, right?
Yep, and it's cheap. The airport as well in Darwin, like to get here, Darwin, like I live in a place called Coconut Grove. The airport is about 6 minutes from my house. And how far am I from the city? About 7 minutes. So the airport's, mate, smack bang in the center of town, just about. So you get over here, even if you're transiting from where you are in Newcastle or whatever, and just want to spend, I don't know, the day transiting here, it's literally a quick trip from the airport all the way to town. And it's, really convenient.
Did you experience, or do you know people that has experienced the 2-week detention centre in Darwin if you got a quarantine? Although quarantine is not really a thing these days. But wasn't there a big one located up in Darwin?
Howard Springs, my man.
That's it.
Boom,
that sounded a bit familiar.
Maybe I should do Hotel Quarantine Part 2 and get on the news again. Do you remember that, Ben?
Oh, well, I was going to put that in the introduction, mate, but I did encourage you to be a part of history. Locked down in a hotel for 2 weeks. Not many people was in your situation where you basically got booted out of Europe and you had to return to Australia and quarantine. And you went viral around Australia, and the beautiful interview of the BBC. That was delightful. Good on you.
Ben,
you turn a lemon into lemonade.
You may have even got a mention in that interview. So you're actually partially famous yourself.
Speaking of cool people, Darwin, I've heard, is full of cool people. It's been described to me, a friend of mine's in the military and spent a lot of lived there, and she described it as a very transient city. So, for example, Newcastle, most people here are born and raised and born and raised and born and raised, and it's been like that for decades. But I've heard there's a lot of good things in Darwin that people fly up there, might say that, tour guiding might be an example, but there's a lot of people that come and go, and there's a lot of people that's born and raised. Is that sound about right?
Oh, mate. Yeah, you described that perfectly. A lot of people come to Darwin generally through transit. So it could be 6 months, a year, maybe a couple of years, and then they're out. The big reason why people don't stay here longer is just simply the weather. It's hard to take sometimes.
It's hot and sticky.
Like the dry season, it's hot and sticky, the humidity and the rain during the wet season. I find it very tranquil and very romantic, the rain. So sometimes when I'm just sitting at home having
that's that Irish background, it's cold, it's freezing, and then you get there and you're like, hey, I love the heat. But I am a fan of that type of place. Not that I'm trying to discredit or dislike Newcastle, love the place, but I do really commonly you find transient type cities. You don't really, Darwin is a city. I think it's about 150,000 people. But it's a small blip on the world map in terms of population. Transient populations, it might be like, your New York, your Sydney, your Melbourne, your Londons. People move there for work opportunities. What is it? I think there's a military base up there, an army base. I think there's a few thousand American troops always based there. Tourism, obviously, while you've gone there. Why do people come and go from Darwin?
Ben, I don't want to discredit your statistic. You said 150,000. It's actually
Wikipedia?
147,000.
Right.
So let's
glad you clarified.
Okay, there's 3,000 of my mates around the corner really pissed off at you. So just
maybe they don't have the Americans. Maybe it's a 3,000 shortage. They don't qualify as citizens of Darwin, being American citizens and all.
Are you discrediting Americans, Ben?
I'm not discrediting, but maybe they're not on the census. Going off Wikipedia.
No, you're spot on, mate. The military, and speaking of the airport that we were speaking of before, it's one of the only airports in Australia that actually shares their airport, the domestic and international travel airport, with the military. So if I'm not mistaken, this is the largest military base in Australia. So we have 4 or 5 barracks kind of within the greater Darwin region. And then we've got a really large one out by the 3rd largest city in the Northern Territory in your old neck of the woods, Katherine.
That's right. I went to primary school up in Katherine. Here's a bit of a fun fact, which I just learned today, because you said the military base both share the runway of the airport.
Yes.
Guess where else that happens in Australia?
Newcastle?
Bingo! You're right, because there's all the F-35s and the Super Hornets all based up there, about 50 or 100 of them. Fighter, and they all play war games just north of Newcastle. There you go. Bit of a fun fact. Bit of a uncanny little link. We might be getting nuclear submarines. How about that? Might be thanks, ScoMo, for parking. Oh, we've got coal, and now we need some nuclear. Well, good for the environment.
I told you the other day I picked up Scott Morrison and his entourage.
You did.
For
those who's listening, stalk Mr. Mark Fay's Instagram. You'll see pictures of ScoMo. You took around his entourage. How was that experience?
Mate, do you know what? I'll put this to you, Ben. So I was told, like, I had an hour's notice. Hey, by the way, Mark, you're going, because we also do transfers for whoever or whenever. And my boss said, hey, Mark, do you mind going to the RAF base and picking up some people? And I said, yeah, no dramas. So anyway, I'm driving in, and then I get a phone call as I'm driving to the RAF base from a Canberra number, and I answered it. And then the guy said, oh, hi, is this Mark? I said, yep. He goes, oh, Mark, are you all set to pick up the Prime Minister? You're all good? And I said, yeah, no dramas. I'll grab the president too. Does that sound good? I did say that.
President.
And I thought he was taking the piss. So yep. I thought it was my boss. I didn't know this Canberra. So I hung up and was like, yeah, no, it's all good. Only joking, all good. And then I followed the military, like, car and entourage area onto the actual military airport landing strip. And then I see, I don't know what the plane we call it, in America, they call it Air Force One, whatever our plane name is called. And then lo and behold, 10 minutes later, I see Scott Morrison hopping off the plane. And I'm thinking, tell me you're not getting in this disgusting ropeable of a bus. I didn't even shower that morning, but thankfully I was just picking up his friends, like his, journalists and the media people.
Yeah.
But I got to follow him around for the afternoon, which you'd think would be cool, but I really couldn't care less, like most Australians.
But if you love politics, yeah, what an experience. Like, maybe that's why they picked you, because you didn't really care.
No, Ben,
mate, a couple more things that I want to touch on about Darwin. Historically, it's been wiped out twice. So a big cyclone come along. Actually, before that, 1943, the Japanese bombed it, and I believe there was more bombs dropped on Darwin than it was in Pearl Harbor. I think it was the same aircraft carrier fleet. And then in the 1970s, I think there was a very famous Cyclone Tracy come along and wiped it out. So it's been wiped out twice. So I'm guessing, has Darwin got a lot of modern buildings as a result of that? Or is there, half blown up buildings still there and it's been historically preserved? Can you find any history of these two incidences?
Ben, you have this habit of asking the most amazing questions. That is just molto bene.
You have to Google this one.
Yes. No, spot on. It's funny because you mentioned two things. You mentioned the war and you mentioned Cyclone Tracy. Mate, they are the two things which Darwin has profited from greatly. So most of our museums, like most of the museums here have some sort of influence or some sort of description about the war. And it was 1942, the 19th of February. So it was just under 2 months after Pearl Harbor. And you were right. The same planes were used to drop the bombs. Mate, you probably think, it lasted maybe 2 days, the dropping of bombs from the Japanese. Do you know how long it actually lasted, the dropping of bombs? 21 months.
Bombing Darwin, 21 months.
Mate, you think of what's going on in Ukraine at the moment. Mate, Darwin had a similar thing. There were 64 air raids, and we had the bombing of Darwin, and then of course we had Cyclone Tracy, and that was in 1974, which wiped out pretty much the majority of Darwin. And your question was, has Darwin rebuilt? Mate, Darwin was flattened by Cyclone Tracy. Like, people don't probably realize, unless you were here in the early 70s and then came back afterwards, you wouldn't actually realize how catastrophic that cyclone was. So if you're asking, have the buildings all been built up and is it all modern? No, they're not modern. They're all 1974, 75 buildings. Do you know what I mean?
So you can't really find a heritage listed building around.
Good question. Far out, Ben. Handsome, ask good questions. You're just, you melt.
A game for you, bud.
You brought your A++ game.
Mate, I didn't even, that's not even on my prep list.
Can't wait till you come and stay with me, man. Sorry. No, you
You know, I don't edit anything out, by the way. This is keeping it raw.
Sorry, I forgot. What was your question? Sorry. Oh, heritage listed. Yes, there are some heritage listed buildings. There were some buildings that survived. But it's funny because most of Darwin has just been completely rebuilt. And we still get cyclones to this day. That the last cyclone that was here was a couple of years ago. They called it the handsome cyclone off the north. Its name was Cyclone Mark, believe it or not.
No. Aren't always cyclones after females?
That's
what
what
a
I
female
thought.
name.
That's what I thought. And
so
I
the
don't
one
know the
male
reason
name
why.
they decided to pick was Mark. Kind of
Well,
says it all,
I
doesn't
told
it?
you. The most handsome man of the north, you know, that's what it's all about. So yeah, no, it's, if you come here, Ben, you'll see that it is stuck in the 70s and 80s, the look of the place.
Stuck.
Yeah.
There's many cities around the world that's stuck in the 1800s when you look at the buildings. Stuck. It sounds like it's stuck in modern times.
Yeah. I mean, but you think of Australia though, we develop real, like we're quite modern. It's not often, generally when a building's 50 years old, it gets knocked down and rebuilt kind of thing. We're not Europe.
Well, it depends. It depends where you are. So if you're in Melbourne or Sydney and you got like a lovely townhouse or a facade, like a friend of mine's got a house in a not exactly a desirable place in Newcastle, but it's got a facade. It's heritage listed. Let's keep the look of the whole place because it's built in,
Really?
I don't know. Yeah, this is New South Wales, mate, Victoria. So there's really rundown buildings, which is heritage listed. You can't, if you want to paint it, you got to get approval off your councils, things like that.
Really?
Yeah. So Darwin, it sounds got nothing like that. So I could turn up, demolish a house, build whatever, and there's not a lot of kickback. Where other places in Australia, you, like I said, you got to get approval just to paint it because there's a lot of history involved. Hobart's like that, Melbourne, Newcastle, and there's hundreds of years old. So it's to preserve the vibe, just the general vibe. So the vibe of Darwin is
that from the castle? The vibe?
Yes, I am quoting the castle.
Yeah. I know that from somewhere.
It's Marbo. It's the vibe. Okay, so maybe that part of that good vibe energy you're talking about, maybe there's a connection there. Don't know.
Yeah. Look, there are places that are modern. There are heritage listed buildings that did survive Tracy, but for the most part, very tropical-esque from the 70s and 80s feel about this place. So when you come over, finally, Ben, we're going to go to Kakadu. We're going to go to Katherine, which is famous, of course, for the Katherine Gorge.
I have to go there because of personal reasons. I want to see my old school, if it's still there. But the gorge, I remember as a child, because I was like 5 or 6, red dirt and the gorge. That's it. That's all I can remember because it was like huge red cliff faces, I think.
Oh, mate, to be honest, it's
and flooding.
Ben,
it flooded.
The floods are bad, man. Like the floods, the 1998 Christmas flood got up to 18 meters from the Katherine River. It completely buried the town. Just think of Venice. That's what it looked like.
Mate, think of Lismore again right now. Take 2.
Yep.
Phenomenal.
But you know what? You go check out that thing in Katherine, the Katherine Gorge, mate. I'm telling you, it is the most gorgeous thing.
Hey, there it is.
You'll ever see.
I bet you say that on every trip, every tour guiding.
It's rinse, recycle, repeat, rinse, recycle.
All right, mate.
Yep. You know,
I got 2 more questions I really want to throw at you. You love your food. You said it has an Asian connection. It says transient people with tourists. And there's a lot of tourists. Usually there's typically good food to cater.
Yep.
What's there to eat? The barramundi and what else?
The barramundi, as mentioned, seafood's its big thing, mate. And there's actually a restaurant here which is a fish and chips restaurant. It's called Frying Nemo, which is located in Stuart Park, only a short walk from town. You will get Australia's best fish and chips at this place. There's a little one tip for you. The other food, Ben, you will get here is, yes, I've mentioned Asian. So Vietnamese, Korean, and Chinese food is super popular here, as well as Thai food. So probably the thing most notable here, because we have markets most weekends. The most famous one maybe you've heard of is the Middle Beach Market.
No, I haven't. I've heard it's a thing, but I don't know the name of it. I've heard it's like the top thing to do in Darwin's these markets. What's the deal?
Yeah. There's 3 markets. There's the Parat markets, which is down the road from me. That's every Saturday, 8 o'clock until 2. There's the Nightcliff markets, which are up the road from me every Sunday, again, the same time. But the big one is the Mindle Beach market, sunset markets. So that's during the dry season only. And mate, it's just a massive big market, really close to town. It's a big event. So there's food stalls everywhere. There's live music, there's souvenirs and things you can buy. What people do, which is really cool, is they buy their food. They then walk the 1 minute to the beach and they'll eat their food, which is generally the most famous thing to get is the laksa spicy noodle soup. Awesome. And what they do is as sunset is over, they're watching sunset as they're eating their laksa or whatever, crepes, whatever. They they give the sunset a big round of applause when the sunset's over. It's like a big theater show.
It's like a thing. It's like what entertainment.
Mate, it's hilarious. Like, you're like, when's the applause coming? When's it coming? Where's it coming? There it is. So, we'll go there, mate. The food, the markets, Katherine, Litchfield, mate, the history with the war, and of course the history with the cyclone. They're the big things here, mate.
All right, you're going to give my final thing I want to wrap this up with, mate. My final question, which I think you just might have answered it, like if someone like myself were to turn up for a week, paint the perfect itinerary, but think it, I mean, I'm a bit weird. I have eclectic tastes, you know, but broad scope of people, fly up there, up in Darwin, paint that itinerary the best you can on a not a crazy budget.
No, great question. Firstly, I would start by getting married with markyourceremony.com.au.
Nice plug. Oh, yes. Just for FYI, for those who's listened to this far, congratulations. What else are you doing up in Mark? And yes, you're a tour guide, but you also, you marry people.
I marry motherfuckers,
you're illegal.
motherfucker. Yep, I marry people. I get people, because I have so much love. I provide my love service to them and then they provide love back. It's just a big loving atmosphere here in Darwin. No, so I do that and I do tour guiding. And of course, Ben, you're going to be followed on our podcast, Our Other Travel Podcast. Don't miss the bus. We also do podcasting. So your podcast, my podcast, mate, we're going to take over the world.
Yes, we are. One listener at a time.
One very slow listener at a time.
Yeah, we get a subscriber once a year. It's good.
Mate, if I was to say about an itinerary, rather than kind of going on about it, I would just tell you this. Stay in Darwin, see Darwin, experience Darwin, go to our museums. We have 30 different museums, which may surprise you again.
That is very surprising.
Have a drink here. Yeah, and they're good museums as well. Go down to the waterfront. It's a $1.1 billion waterfront precinct. Have a drink down there, have some food, have some mud crab, do your thing down there, explore the city by foot, have a bit of a play on Mitchell Street, which is the big going out area with all the crazy bars and atmosphere. Mate, you probably need 2 days, 3 days in Darwin. Once you've got that out of your system, get out of there and go up the Stewart Highway, which goes all the way to South Australia, and spend some time at Litchfield. I would stay at Litchfield. Remember, I told you it's an hour and 20 minutes from Darwin. Stay there, go have a swim, experience the waterfalls, go fishing, go for a drive, do your thing. Enjoy Litchfield. Once you've done that for a couple of days, get back on that Stewart Highway because it's all the same direction. Then head down en route to Katherine. Spend a bit of time in Katherine, say again, another night, 2 nights, see the gorge, go to the Katherine River Hot Springs, chill out down there. Don't spend too much time at Katherine would be my advice. And then come back up heading towards Darwin and en route coming back to Darwin, go through Kakadu. Spend again 2 nights at Kakadu. At Kakadu, you can see rock art. You can go hiking. You've got some beautiful escarpments you can go check out. You can see Arnhem Land. After that, mate, get back to Darwin, spend another night, and you're done, mate. You've had the whole NT top end experience, and you need a week, 8 days. And mate, you will have a ball. The best thing to do is hire a car. We say it's expensive, mate, wear the cost. Seriously, you don't need a 4-wheel drive. Just get a car, regular
I thought
car.
you'd be going somewhat off-road. I mean, it's a pretty isolated part of the world. I mean, Darwin's a bit of a city, but once you're out of it, you're saying it's all sealed roads.
Mate, it's like people thinking like international people coming to Australia, there's kangaroos just boxing on the street. The roads here are amazing. Like the roads are phenomenal. The roads which, you do need a 4-wheel drive for. Yes, they, of course, they're going to take you to some pretty cool spots, but mate, for the most part, you don't need I've never had a 4-wheel drive here, and I've had an absolute ball almost every weekend going to a new site. So
interesting.
When you come with me, Ben, and we have, some mango cheesecake, they love their mangoes here, and we just chill out, have a froth, mate, we're going to have a ball. And you know what, Ben? My services are free for you.
Wow. What do you normally charge? I'm kidding.
Well, if you get married and meet a girl up here, that's a whole different story.
I'll marry someone up there just for you, mate. You can even pick them out if you really want.
I definitely know who I would pick out. That would be fun.
All right. It sounded like you've added a lot of value. I am sold on Darwin. Like I said, I've been there once, it was for tour guiding work. I didn't really get to soak it up. I really want to go back there, really want to check it out. And you as my tour guide, of course, because all your facts, your knowledge, and we can get married. That like legally married, which is awesome. But normally what I've done, because this is number podcast 20, I'll wrap it up, sign off, and thank the person for coming on. Can you do the honor? I want to give you the honor of wrapping up this podcast. Get Lost with a Travel Guide with your host, Ben. Going to be wrapped up by Mark Fay and Darwin.
Ben, this is an honor like no honor I've ever received. And I'm a bit shaky. Look at my hands. They're moving up and down. I do want to say something, and I'm sorry if this embarrasses you and makes you feel a bit uncomfortable, but you are an absolute jet. You're obviously one of my best mates, and we both do a very similar sort of podcast show, and I love listening to your podcast. It won't be longer than 24 hours without me listening to one of your episodes. You do such a good job, man. You bring such a whole lot of positivity towards me and others with all the guests that you have on and all the places you talk about. Keep up the good work, man. It's so good. I hope more people listen to your podcast because it is really.
I've only got one subscriber, but I've finally figured it out. It's been yourself, so I appreciate it.
Mate, get subscribed. Seriously, you talk some quality stuff and you interview some quality people. So no, I'm wrapped that you asked me to come on, and I'm just wrapped even just to have a chat with you. So thank you, Ben, and thank you for tuning in, and thank you for being so handsome and amazing, and I love you.
You made it to the end of the podcast. All right. You know the drill. Give us a like, subscribe, or leave some juicy comments. And thank you so much for listening to Get Lost with the Travel Guide, where we talk all things travel, tourism, and adventure. See you next time.